For centuries, the British Parliament and the royal family have danced around each other. Two pillars of power pretending harmony, while quietly measuring who really holds the weight of the nation. But this time, something has snapped. It began not with a scandal, but with exhaustion. Lawmakers, many of them lifelong monarchists, started whispering in corridors about how much longer they could defend the House of Windsor's silence amid the chaos. Every week seemed to bring another headline about royal disrespect, media manipulation, or titles being used to sell products in California. And what was once dismissed as tabloid noise began to sound like national embarrassment. That's when the conversations turned serious. Buried deep within Westminster's agenda appeared something extraordinary, a quiet mention of a letter patent reform bill. At first, it sounded procedural, even dull. But to those who understand royal language, it was thunder in disguise. Because this bill wasn't about etiquette or symbolism. It was about redefining what it means to be royal in the modern age. Insiders say the debate began as a subtle attempt to clarify lines of succession and financial accountability. But it quickly evolved into something much sharper: the possibility of revoking royal titles from individuals who no longer serve or represent the crown. The mood in Parliament was unlike anything seen since the days of Diana's tragedy. This time, the conversation wasn't emotional, it was constitutional. And though no one dared to name names publicly, everyone knew who this was about: Harry, Meghan, Andrew, and perhaps even those who had remained quietly irrelevant, yet still carried royal privileges. For the first time, Parliament was not just observing the monarchy, it was preparing to act upon it. Behind the scenes, advisors close to senior members of the royal family began to notice a shift in tone. The palace wasn't leading the conversation anymore. Westminster was. The crown, once the sun around which all British power revolved, now seemed to be orbiting Parliament's gravity. And as debates heated behind closed doors, one question echoed in the halls of power: if the monarchy cannot regulate itself, should the people do it for them? The air grew electric. What started as a quiet correction of law began to resemble a historic reckoning, one that could redraw royal identity altogether. And somewhere within those echoing corridors, a familiar figure was said to be listening closely, watching every move, every headline, every hesitation from his father's court. Because he wasn't content to wait for the throne anymore. He was ready to reshape it. While Westminster whispered about reform, another kind of silence filled the royal residences, a deliberate, strategic silence. And at the center of it stood Prince William, the man long trained to wait, now realizing that waiting might destroy the very institution he was born to lead. For years, William had played the role of the dutiful heir, the calm one, the stable one, the steady hand that contrasts his brother's rebellion. But recent years had taught him something painful. Patience doesn't protect the monarchy anymore. Action does. According to multiple insiders, William began to view the situation like a surgeon facing infection. Painful, but necessary to cut. He reportedly began quiet talks with trusted advisors, not just from the palace, but from Parliament itself. He didn't want revenge on his brother. He wanted clarity. He wanted to build a monarchy that could survive the digital storm, the scandal cycle, and the American spotlight, even if it meant sacrificing family peace to do it. Those close to him describe a man who has traded emotion for resolve. Every public appearance now carries a subtext: discipline, order, control. Gone is the younger prince who once tried to shield everyone from the media's fire. Now he's lighting the torch himself to burn away what weakens the crown. William reportedly supports the reform effort, but subtly. He never speaks publicly about titles or punishments. Instead, his message to aides has been firm and consistent. If the monarchy is to mean anything, it must stand for something. And that something is service, not celebrity. The change in his demeanor hasn't gone unnoticed. Palace staff describe him as surgical, decisive to the point of unnerving. He reviews public sentiment reports personally. He monitors polling data about the royal family's image. And while others see family drama, he sees a strategic operation to restore the crown's credibility before he inherits it. But William's growing influence has created quiet tension within Buckingham Palace. Because not everyone agrees with his pace or his ruthlessness. And one of those voices of caution, ironically, wears the very crown William will someday inherit. King Charles, the monarch of compromise, now finds himself facing an heir who refuses to compromise at all. The son who was once his greatest hope is now his greatest challenge. A leader waiting for permission to act in a world that no longer waits. When Parliament began circling the idea of a royal reform bill, King Charles found himself in a position no monarch envies, caught between the two things that define him, family and duty. And for a man who had waited 70 years to wear the crown, that inside Buckingham Palace, the tension was almost visible. Courtiers describe hushed meetings stretching past midnight. Folders marked constitutional risk stacked beside family photo frames. Because Charles knew something that few others dared say out loud. If Parliament succeeded in rewriting the laws of royal privilege, the monarchy would never be the same again. Yet the irony cut deep. The first monarch to advocate modernization was now being overtaken by it. He had spent his reign trying to humanize the crown, speaking about climate, tolerance, even compassion. But Westminster didn't want compassion, it wanted accountability. And that demand pointed straight toward the family's most controversial exiles, his younger son and daughter-in-law. Charles's heart, by many accounts, leaned toward forgiveness. He had endured public humiliation before. The divorce, the press battles, the years of being the unwanted heir. He understood what it meant to be despised and misunderstood. But the crown was no longer just his to protect emotionally. It was an institution bound by public trust. And that trust, once cracked, doesn't heal with sentiment. So for perhaps the first time in his life, Charles began to act like a king instead of a father. He commissioned internal reviews on royal finances, appearances, and the use of titles abroad. The reports, sources say, were uncomfortable reading, especially where the Sussex brand intersected with global commerce. What was once modern independence now looked like a business built on royal association. Every decision carried a moral echo. If he defended his son, critics would call it favoritism. If he sided with Parliament, he'd be accused of betrayal. And through it all, William's quiet assertiveness loomed in the background, a constant reminder that the future was already knocking on the door. Privately, Charles confided to aides that the monarchy's survival would depend on perception, not bloodline. He could forgive Harry, but he couldn't risk the crown being seen as powerless. So he chose a middle path: delay, consultation, diplomacy. Buying time, perhaps, for wounds to close. But outside the palace walls, time was running out. Public polls showed increasing frustration with royal indecision. And inside Parliament, one lawmaker put it bluntly, if the king can't choose between being a father or being a sovereign, Westminster will choose for him. That sentence would echo all the way to California and into the very heart of the couple who had once called the United Kingdom home. Because while London debated legacy, Los Angeles was planning something very different and very profitable. Across the Atlantic, the sun fell differently, not on palaces or portraits, but on cameras, contracts, and California ambition. For Meghan Markle, what began as a royal love story had transformed into an empire built on independence, storytelling, and symbolism. But that empire was starting to feel the tremor from across the ocean. When British headlines started whispering about the potential loss of royal titles, American networks listened, and suddenly, the Duke and Duchess branding, the elegant signature on podcasts, documentaries, and luxury deals, was in question. Without those titles, everything from legal trademarks to media perception could shift overnight. Insiders say Meghan saw it coming before anyone else did. She had always been media savvy. Understanding that reputation, not lineage, is the real currency of modern royalty. But this was different. This was London, threatening to pull the last golden thread that tied her to the story millions still paid attention to. Behind the scenes, her team scrambled to reframe the narrative. If Britain wanted to strip them of titles, fine. Then the story would become about power, not privilege. The Duchess turned producer started leaning harder into themes of resilience, women's strength, and personal liberation, recasting herself not as the wife who left, but as the woman who broke free. Yet even as the message evolved, the anxiety lingered. Every news cycle mentioning Parliament's bill meant new negotiations, new statements to control, new fire to put out. And the one thing Meghan's brand couldn't afford was unpredictability. Because while sympathy sells, scandal burns faster. Sources close to Hollywood circles say her production ventures entered a quiet holding pattern. Executives wanted clarity, not just about titles, but about audience sentiment. Would the world still tune in for Meghan Markle without the Duchess of Sussex? Meanwhile, Harry's mood reportedly shifted from frustration to fatigue. He had hoped time would heal the rift, that distance would soften the institution's stance. But now, watching his homeland debate whether his own identity should legally exist, he began to see the monarchy not as family, but as a system. A system designed to survive even if it meant erasing him. And while the couple's united front remained polished in public, insiders whispered that behind closed doors, decisions were being weighed. Whether to fight, to adapt, or to walk away completely from anything royal. The irony couldn't be sharper. The farther they ran from the crown, the more it followed them. On magazine covers, in talk show monologues, in every whisper about what happens next. Because the question that haunted them now wasn't about loss of titles. It was about loss of control. And in the world of image, losing control can be more dangerous than losing a crown. As Meghan reviewed headlines over morning coffee in Montecito, one line from a British newspaper stood out like a dare. Westminster is rewriting the royal rulebook. Will California rewrite the royal legacy? And somewhere, thousands of miles away, William was already considering the same question, but from a throne that was no longer waiting. If Meghan's world trembled on the wings of brand and business, Harry's world shook with something heavier: realization. The prince who once declared independence from the monarchy, who once left Buckingham with his own rules and a Hollywood skyline behind him, was now confronting a truth that no amount of distance could hide. Power and privilege, once surrendered, are not easily reclaimed. Sources close to royal aides describe a man caught in a web of pride, panic, and public perception. The same phone that once rang with opportunities to interview, to speak freely, to sign lucrative deals, now became a tether to an institution he had tried to escape. Daily calls to his father, the king, reportedly went unanswered, the silence echoing louder than any reprimand. It's said that friends watching him from afar noticed a pattern. Harry oscillated between bravado and vulnerability. One moment insisting he had left the monarchy behind, the next negotiating strategies to retain elements of the royal identity that had once defined him. He had thought he could separate the crown from duty, privilege from responsibility. But as Westminster debated the Sussex titles, that fantasy began to crumble. The consequences weren't just symbolic. Without Duke of Sussex, Harry's personal brand, podcasts, speaking engagements, and even media appearances risked losing the royal halo that attracted attention and influence. Imagine being introduced not as a prince, but as Henry Mountbatten Windsor, a name stripped of centuries of allure, history, and immediate recognition. And yet, there was more than personal frustration at stake. There was guilt, a sense of having left a family, a duty, and perhaps a legacy in a precarious state. He had hoped that time and distance would ease tensions, but instead, it had given Westminster and William the space to act decisively. The irony was stark. The rebel prince was now quietly negotiating, dialing back, hoping to regain favor he had once walked away from. Friends allegedly described tense mornings, long conversations with aides about strategy, and evenings filled with reflection, regret, and planning. It's almost Shakespearean, a man torn between pride and survival, legacy and rebellion, freedom and consequence. And yet, through this personal storm, the monarchy quietly prepared for a public reckoning that would dwarf any individual sorrow. Harry's regret was private, but the implications were global. For once, the monarchy's rules, precedent, and public accountability moved faster than any family loyalty. No royal crisis exists in isolation. For every modern upheaval, there is a historical mirror. And for the Sussex titles, that mirror reflects Prince Andrew. Once celebrated as a royal son, Andrew's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Allegations, controversy, and public outrage culminated in a legal and ceremonial stripping of titles, privileges, and honors. The message was clear. No one, not even blood, is above scrutiny. When Parliament began referencing the Sussex situation, insiders say Andrew's precedent became their blueprint. The logic was methodical. If legal and symbolic consequences could apply to Andrew for conduct that tarnished the crown, why not extend the same principle to anyone threatening its integrity? Fairness, it seems, is being enforced through fire, not favoritism. William reportedly took this lesson seriously. The heir saw the monarchy regain respect and stability after Andrew's removal, and he interpreted it as a roadmap. This wasn't about revenge or personal vendetta. It was about restoring legitimacy, ensuring that public trust remained intact, and reinforcing the idea that titles and privileges are earned through duty, not merely inherited. The stakes deepened further when Parliament's attention expanded to Harry and Meghan's children, Archie and Lilibet. Born in California, far from royal responsibilities, their very existence began to intersect with constitutional law. Lawmakers started revisiting King George V's letters patent of 1917, questioning whether children born outside service-oriented frameworks should inherit titles at all. The emerging argument: titles are for service, not souvenirs. If a royal role is abandoned or left unfulfilled, its associated privileges cannot remain merely ceremonial or commercial. Allegedly, Meghan reacted with fury, interpreting the moves as an attempt to erase her children's royal identity. But insiders stress that this isn't about personal vendetta or political statement. It's about relevance, duty, and clarity in an institution built to endure centuries. Every line, every clause, every precedent now serves as a guidepost, ensuring that the monarchy survives scrutiny, public expectation, and the challenges of a globalized, media-driven age. The lessons of Andrew, the pressure from the public, and the calculated orchestration by William have combined to create a situation unprecedented in modern royal history. A storm is building, one that balances tradition against adaptation, blood against law, and emotion against principle. And as Parliament quietly drafts reforms, the monarchy itself braces for what insiders are calling a constitutional fire, a test not of one family, but of the institution's survival in the 21st century. As the Sussex titles saga escalated in London, an entirely new dimension emerged across the Atlantic. Archie and Lilibet, born under the Californian sun, had spent their lives far from Buckingham's gilded corridors. Yet their names suddenly became the focal point of a constitutional storm. For centuries, royal titles had been more than symbols. They were markers of duty, service, and legacy. Now, however, the world watched as lawmakers debated whether these markers could exist without the obligations that historically accompanied them. The argument was simple but unyielding. Titles are not souvenirs. They are commitments. If one chooses to live entirely outside the royal framework, should one retain privileges tied to service? Westminster appeared to say no. Sources close to the palace claimed that discussions regarding the children were delicate, yet decisive. Legal advisors, historians, and constitutional experts reportedly pored over King George V's 1917 letters patent, revisiting the rules with an intensity not seen in decades. Every clause, every precedent, every footnote became a weapon in a debate that straddled centuries. Archie and Lilibet, in effect, had become the first modern test case for what it means to be royal in an era when the monarchy must justify its relevance. For Meghan, the implications were more than legal. They were existential. Her children's titles were more than ceremony. They were woven into her personal brand, her public persona, and her empire. Without the Duchess and Prince/Princess markers, every contract, every appearance, every deal risked losing resonance and impact. Reports suggest that her legal team scrambled to explore workarounds, from creative trademark adjustments to alternate naming conventions. But even the cleverest legal maneuvering could not change the symbolic reality. Westminster was ready to assert authority over titles, and public opinion backed them. Harry's reaction mirrored Meghan's anxiety, but with a different shade. The man who had once rejected royal life now found himself defending the very institution he had abandoned. His struggle was twofold: protecting his children while also preserving a connection to a monarchy that now seemed both distant and inescapable. Daily communications with palace aides reportedly became more frequent, strategic, and urgent as Harry sought to navigate this delicate legal and emotional terrain. The public, meanwhile, had already weighed in. Social media buzzed with speculation, outrage, and debate. Many hailed the potential title removals as a long-overdue assertion of principle, emphasizing service over celebrity. Others decried it as an overreach, a punishment projected onto children for choices they had no agency in making. The tension between duty, tradition, and modernity had reached a tipping point, and the Sussex children were squarely in the center. This was no longer a story of adult scandal or media intrigue. It was about legacy, lineage, and the very definition of royalty in the 21st century. And in the quiet halls of Westminster, far from California's sun, lawmakers prepared for what insiders called a historic, symbolic act, one that could rewrite the rules for generations of royals yet unborn. While palace walls and Californian mansions were abuzz, another force quietly shifted the balance of power: the public. For centuries, the British monarchy had operated in relative insulation, buffered by tradition, ceremony, and centuries of unquestioned authority. But in the age of social media, petitions, and instant news cycles, the public's voice carried unprecedented weight. It all began with digital observation. Eagle-eyed citizens noticed a glaring inconsistency. Harry and Meghan were still listed as working royals on the official royal website, despite their public disengagement. Outrage followed swiftly, amplified across platforms. Headlines screamed, "Digital betrayal," and "Remove them now." Petitions flooded Parliament, demanding action, while taxpayers questioned why they were funding privileges for royals who no longer performed royal duties. Suddenly, a private constitutional discussion became a public mandate. Parliament responded not out of curiosity, but because democracy demanded it. And so, the idea of the Great Purge, the nickname insiders reportedly gave to the Reform Bill, gained momentum. The term alone signaled the seriousness, a sweeping, deliberate action that could remove half a dozen royals from official status, cleaning the institutional slate. Among those targeted were Prince Andrew, Princess Beatrice, Princess Eugenie, and of course, Harry and Meghan. One stroke of the pen, insiders said, could erase decades of titles, privileges, and ceremonial influence. And while bureaucratic on the surface, the act was anything but ordinary. To the royals, it was historic, almost biblical. William's influence was evident throughout, guiding strategy, ensuring fairness, and preparing the monarchy for the aftermath. This wasn't personal vengeance, it was institutional survival. When the Reform Bill finally passed its last stages, the symbolic act of sealing it with royal crimson wax reportedly sent shockwaves through the palace. Titles that once sparkled in gold were quietly removed from the official register. Harry and Meghan's branding empire, once fortified by royal identity, faced immediate recalibration. The message was unmistakable. The monarchy had teeth. Tradition would no longer shield inaction, and public scrutiny could no longer be ignored. The Great Purge didn't just affect individuals. It signaled a new era for the British monarchy, an era where duty outweighed privilege, public perception influenced governance, and the crown could bite back against those who threatened its stability. And while the palace doors remain shut to the press, insiders suggest this is just the beginning. The precedent set, the rules rewritten, and the message sent ensures that the monarchy can no longer operate in a vacuum. The crown, once ceremonial and untouchable, has entered its ruthless modern era, one where survival demands clarity, courage, and sometimes hard decisions that even blood cannot shield. The lesson is clear. In this new royal era, the institution belongs not to those who wear it casually, but to those who are brave enough to defend it, protect it, and modernize it. And that, as the dust settles, is the story of a monarchy transformed, a family tested, and a nation watching history unfold. The children,